I remember the first time that I edited a podcast episode, and I remember thinking to myself, why in the world does this take so long? If you are feeling like that, I think you might enjoy today's episode. Today, we're going to talk about why editing actually takes so long, some things that you can do to help maybe cut that time down a bit, as well as some tools that we are really enjoying and some that we maybe don't, but you might enjoy as well to help with that editing process. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Successful Podcasting Unlocked. I am your host, Alicia Galati. I am the founder of Galati Media, a full-service podcast management agency where we help business owners launch and maintain lead-generating podcasts. Now, what does full service mean? That means we offer everything from the strategy and the content help and support all the way through to the market research and the editing and the show notes and the copy and the social posts, all the way to the end of monetizing your show and ensuring that you are creating something that is leading your listeners back into your funnels, back into your business, and potentially getting some sales from those listeners. We have produced over 2,000 episodes as a company, and I have not counted how many I have personally produced, but I know the number is up there because before I started my agency, I was doing all of the editing myself, and I also had my own podcasts. So I started my very first podcast in 2018, and there weren't a lot of tools out there at the time. At least none that I could afford that would help with the editing. So I have been using Audacity to edit podcasts for a very long time, since 2018. And I love the tool, but I understand that it takes time. So what are some things that you can do to maybe minimize the time? But before we get into that, why does it take so long? The podcast editing stat is that the time that it takes to edit an episode is roughly 4 times the length of your original raw audio. So if your episode is 30 minutes long without any edits at all, then it might take you about 2 hours to edit. Now that means you are going through, taking out any of the ums, the ers, the false starts, the stumbling over your words. You're taking out all of that stuff. You're adding in your intro, your outro. Maybe you have an ad. Maybe you got a little jingle to transition from one section of your podcast to another. You're adding in all of these elements. You then run it through a tool like Auphonic to take out some of those breaths, as well as to normalize your audio for podcasts specifically. By the end of that, there's your 2 hours. How can you help make that time a little shorter? One of my favorite tools is silence. I don't mean the silencer tool in Audacity. What I mean is if you make a mistake, pause. We have seen clients do this over and over again where they try to just barrel through a mistake, and honestly, pausing and restating it, giving yourself and your brain a pause can really help with the editing process. So we highly recommend to our clients as well as to you. So here's your tip. Pause. Give yourself some space. If you feel like your words are jumbling, you're probably talking too fast and you're not getting your point across in the way that you really can effectively do so. So pause. It's okay. You can edit it out. I've also seen people not edit at all. So you can be someone who decides, look, I'm going to show up as this way. I'm going to keep in my ums. I'm going to keep in my right? I'm gonna keep in my and so's. I'm gonna keep in all of that stuff that makes me me. They're just gonna have to deal with it. And while I understand that if you are a business owner and you're using your podcast to generate leads, you might want to show up a little more professionally. And if you are a podcaster using your podcast as a way to pitch yourself to be a speaker, you're gonna want to make sure that you've got that honed in. You need to be practicing how you're speaking. You need to be practicing in the way that you're showing up. So that way, when you say, I have this podcast episode, they don't go and listen and hear 30 ums in a 20-minute episode. You want to make sure that it is clear, concise, exactly how much time needs to be spent in getting your point across, and then moving on. Another way to cut down on that is side tangents. I am the queen of side tangents. I get it. I love going on what I affectionately call side quests within my podcast episodes, whether that's with a guest or by myself. I'm always down for a side quest. But when it comes to a podcast episode that is delivering value, sometimes you need a script. Sometimes you need an outline to keep you on task, and that's okay. Write out an outline that allows you to say, oh, I might have gone off a bit. Let's keep it to where we need to. That way you have less editing to do as well. Now, in this, I'm not even talking about if you have a guest who, this is not even a joke. We have had guests that have done this, not on my show, but on clients' shows, where they never finish a thought. They kind of start a thought, and then they don't finish it, and then they move on to another half thought, and then they don't finish that thought. They move on to another half thought. In that case, you have to decide, is this episode worth keeping? And if it's going to take you a long time, is it worth maybe hiring someone else who has another ear to listen in and see if they can cut it up and make it a coherent episode? That is actually what we sadly excel at, is being able to take those episodes and make the most of them. We have clients come to us constantly and say, this guest was very long-winded, please cut it down. So we can take an hour episode and turn it into 45 minutes or turn it into 30 minutes. Usually we can't get it under half of the episode, but there are ways, right? We can cut even more. We can cut certain questions. That is one thing that really sets, I think, Galati Media apart from a lot of other producers is we're not just going to go in and edit the ums, the ers, the false starts. We actually listen to every word. And so we've had clients actually speak into their microphone and say, so-and-so, take that part out. So-and-so, I think I need to say this a little differently. And so they'll talk to my team telling them what to take out or what to keep in. And that allows them to feel not only great about knowing that someone is listening to every word and can edit down a lot of that stuff that happens to create a coherent episode, but also that they know that someone's listening. So often podcasting feels like we're kind of talking into the void. We don't want people to feel like that. And so that's why we offer that level of support. So we're not even talking about those types of things. Those are also going to make podcast editing take a lot longer. What are some tools that you can use though as a solo podcaster who has not hired things out to make the most of it? I'm recording this on Riverside. I am a ride or die Riverside person. I love them. They have really up-leveled their platform, and they recently came out with silence detectors as well as transcript editors. So just like tools like Descript, which I find really clunky and difficult to use, but a lot of people rave about it, right? So like that's a tool as well that you can use. I like that they have the ability to go in and you can search for certain things, delete certain things, take out all of the pauses, as well as edit via the transcript. Tools like Descript are also great because they have AI tools built within that allow you to take out any of the ums, the ers, the false starts. Now, tools like Auphonic recently came out with additional tools that are built within. They're currently in beta, so keep that in mind, that they will actually take out the ums and the breaths. So you can use tools like that as well, especially if you're already using them or you're already paying for them. Use those tools that are available to you and then go in and edit the content once you've taken out those ums, taken out the breaths, and maybe cut some of those silences. Like I said, there are so many ways that you can edit a podcast, give yourself some support and some space, hire it out. But don't forget that the podcast audio, while it is an extremely important part of the podcast, it's not the only part. You have to remember that there are other elements that have to be done as well, and those take time too, like social media posts for the podcast, graphics, show notes, SEO titles, all of those things. These things take time. A podcast takes time and effort, and that's okay. If you're willing to show up regularly and consistently in whatever consistency looks like for you, you will be able to see your show grow and it will get out there in front of the right people as long as you are continuing and marketing it correctly. I hope that this was helpful and maybe made you feel less alone. Believe me, we get it. 2,000 episodes under our belts. We understand podcast editing is difficult, but it's not impossible. And as you practice, you can get better, or you can always just hire it out. If you have your own podcasting questions, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or go to successfulpodcastingunlocked.com. I have a place there where you can submit your questions as well. I look forward to hearing from you, and until next time, happy podcasting.